Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Evolving HR webinar session. I am joined today by a panel of men, but also a panel of expert men, because we're talking about men's health today. So without further ado, I will let my panel introduce themselves. I will go around the screen as you appear to me clockwise. So John, would you like to tell everybody, I always want to say who you are and where'd you come from, like blind date, but just tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Reminded me of Cotton Eye Joe, but so I'm John Palmstrom. I'm a full-time coach. I run a business called Off-Piste Coaching. I think one of the key things I work with clients on is around how you can be at your best as a starting point, regardless of what you're looking to achieve. I'm not an expert when it comes to sort of men's health, physical or mental, but I guess I'm here to talk about lived experience, and also having lots of friends. And when you asked me about this, I literally had conversations with some really good friends around the same time, and I was like, oh, we don't talk about this, or oh, we're terrible at doing stuff, taking action and doing things. But that's me. So I'm here as a Johnny off the street, so to speak.
A Johnny off the street who is a man and who has health, good or bad. So yeah, I think that makes you perfectly qualified. Gary, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Gary, as you heard, Gary Johannes, and everything I do is around mental health. So whether that's one-to-many or one-to-one, or actually training people to become therapists. So it's all about men's mental health today for me. Because that's where I work. But I work with evidence-based information and a lot of neuroscience, really backing up what's really going on in the brain and for helping people with their mental health. So that's everything I do is around working with people with mental health issues or helping them stay good so they don't have them. That's more important.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you. Jay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jay Unwin. I'm training and development director at a company called Mental Health and Business, where we deliver training to various companies of various different sizes across all industries on mental health and mental health adjacent topics as well, because sometimes mental health is considered this kind of standalone piece, but there's a lot of things which impact and are impacted by mental health that don't usually come under that umbrella. So we cover all of that stuff as well. Webinars, in-person trainings, workshops, all kinds of bits and pieces. I've been working with this company for almost 4 years, but I've been working in wellbeing, mental health, physical health, habit change, stress management, all of that associated bits and bobs for 13 years now, ever since I burned out rather catastrophically from my first career as a science teacher. Burned out a couple of times since then as well. Burned out in 2017 and lost a successful personal training business. Burned out again in 2019. Didn't burn out 3 times because I love it so much and I just can't stop. But because there are a lot of factors at play when it comes to mental health and physical health, a lot of things outside our control, a lot of things within our control as well that I'll be honest, I wasn't controlling particularly well at any of those points. My stress management behaviors weren't particularly great. I also have a diagnosis of depression, which I manage on a daily basis. I tend to be in good mental health despite that diagnosis, because you can actually still have good mental health even with the diagnosis. But I still have periods where my depression kind of rears its head, and I have to deal with that. I also have a condition called fibromyalgia on the physical side of things, which tends to be 9 out of 10 people who are diagnosed with it are women. And I'm one of the 1 in 10 on that front. And it manifests as chronic pain, chronic fatigue, a slew of other lovely symptoms as well. But it's heavily linked to stress levels. And my consultants think that it was probably triggered by having had cancer in my teenage years, and that's kind of what led on to that, because that was the physical stress that potentially triggered that condition. So for me, it's something that I do on a professional level, and I've got professional interest in. I've got a degree in biology, a master's in psychology. It's something that I'm really interested in from a professional standpoint, but it's something that I live and breathe on a daily basis as well.
Yeah, blimey. I'm going to get straight into I guess it's the elephant in the room question. We have this perception that men aren't great at talking about their health. And I don't just mean mental health, I mean their health full stop. So John, let me ask you first, do you think that is still true in 2025? I know certainly my dad's generation just didn't talk about it at all. Do you think that's still true? And what do you think contributes to that?
I think there's almost like two parts to it. I think one part is, I think people are men are more comfortable talking about things after they've happened. So I think while somebody has something that concerns them or something that's coming up, they're less likely to talk about it. I think after they've had treatment for it, for whatever it was, mental or physical, and they're, out the other side, so to speak, then maybe people are a little bit more open. I think the other element as well is, I still think there's like a big element of not wanting to show weakness. Whether it's, I guess for me and friends who are, dads, and I think there's something about not wanting to sort of let people down as well. There's loads of different factors, but things that I've personally seen and why people might not talk about it is, one, just a sign of weakness is, oh no, I'm fit and healthy, I can't be getting old, I can't be having these things not going right. And then maybe there's something, maybe it's just in my sphere, but I think there's something where if you're contributing to a relationship, a family, to say, oh, I'm not right, it's like, oh, well, actually, I'm letting people down.
That's really powerful, isn't it? And listening to this as a woman, not something that I've ever felt or experienced. It's really interesting just hearing that from your perspective. Jay, what are your thoughts on that in terms of how good you think men are at talking about health and contributing factors?
I think there's more variety within men than there is between men and women, for a start. I think that there's more personal difference than there is between the averages of two groups, if that's what we're going to do. But I think it's contextual more than anything. I think it's contextual because we're a product of the environment we're in, right? And I don't believe we have a single self, a single personality. I think that we adapt to the situations we're in. And I saw a really great point made this week, in fact, about men showing emotion. So on the mental health side of things in particular, and I'll come on to the physical health side of things, because I do agree with what John was saying about that kind of an element of wanting to be that provider and be that kind of the things that we're conditioned to think that we should be as men, and also that denial of aging, which I think is potentially across the board. I don't think that's a men thing. I think that's a human
I can
thing.
identify with that one. Yeah,
conditioned to think that getting old is a bad thing, and it's like, who started that rumor, right?
Yeah.
But the point about context and the point that I saw made this week was that men are actually really good at talking about their feelings and expressing their feelings in the right context. And so the issue that we've got is that the context aren't being provided in the right places. And the point that was being made, or the example that was made in this point, was it was from a guy who grew up with a very kind of typical masculine kind of upbringing from his dad. He grew up like going to watch football matches and stuff like that. And he made the point that if you were 5 minutes before going into the football stadium and you were crying in the car park about something, you'd be told to like man up, come on, pull yourself together, stuff like that. As soon as you're inside the football stadium, as soon as your team walk out and people are crying and cheering and hugging each other, and they're not crying about the football team, they know it's a safe place that they can do that, and that's okay, and it's accepted to cry in a football stadium. And they're crying about the same thing potentially as they would have been outside, but now they're in a place where it's allowed. And they've been told it's allowed, and they've been demonstrated to that it is allowed, it is permitted, it is actively encouraged because it's showing emotion, it's showing passion. And yet other places that's considered taboo, it's considered not allowed. So really the issue isn't that men can't show emotions, can't express emotions. It's that we haven't been always provided the right environment to do so. And another example I thought of off the back of this, which I think you, Kirsty, will appreciate given our common interests, is big, burly, tattooed metalhead blokes singing about feeling sad.
Yep.
People do it in the context that they feel comfortable to do it in.
Yeah.
So I don't think the issue is that men inherently can't talk about this stuff. I think the issue is that maybe we need to show men that it's okay to do that in other contexts.
That's a really good point. Hmm. Yeah, when you think about some of the lyrics that people in bands have written, and it might sound like really aggressive music, but some of it's got incredibly deep meaning to it and is very, very personal, and that's okay. Yeah, I
And
hadn't
that's
thought
what
about
brought
that
me in.
before. That's
That's
interesting.
what brought me into that style of music, and that's why it was so pivotal for me as a teenager. As a teenager with depression, undiagnosed at the time, because it took me years to go and speak to anyone about it. And I know we're focusing on the mental side of things, and it's not the whole picture of what we're talking about today. But for
Mm,
me, I went for years not talking to anyone because of stigma and because of shame. But the thing which got me through was listening to music which dealt with those emotional issues and those ups and downs. And it talked about depression. And I was like, wow, this isn't just me. This is other people
mm,
too. And it's people that I admire. Oh, brilliant. That means that I can get through this. And actually it's okay. I mean, it's not okay. Like it's not, you don't want to be there, but it's okay in the sense of it's normal. Other people feel like it. And this music is something which allowed me to feel less isolated. And so if you've
yeah,
got, and some of those people, you mean that they look like the types that would be like, oh no, he doesn't talk about his feelings. It's like, listen to the music.
yeah, good point. Gary, what would you add in terms of the things that hold people back from men back from talking about health?
I think it's quite a wide spectrum, and I think it's a lot to do with age as well. I can go, I wasn't very good at managing myself when I had cancer and talking to people about it. And even though I knew everything, because apparently I know what I'm talking about, but when it was down to me, I sort of managed it and masked it a little bit to the people who I was supposed to protect,
Right,
because
yeah,
that
yeah.
my role, sort of
Mm,
thing. But then when you look at the younger generation, the was it now Gen Z or something like that?
see.
They're much more open. They're much more able to reach out. But then the Gen Xers are saying, "Oh, don't talk like that," or "Man up," or things like that. So I think there's, depending on what generation, and I can see where Jay's coming from, talking about, I like a lot of rock music, and you hear some great ballads, some rock ballads and that, where people are really opening up. But when it comes to physical health, I know loads of older people, because I'm an older person, who never talk about their issues because it
Mm,
just doesn't get done. We don't talk about that, and they don't go to see the GP and until it's a problem, and then they get help, but not until it's too late quite often.
mm,
Where younger people, and I think a lot of women, are much quicker at identifying early doors and then getting support and help. So I think, we are already learning. The younger generation are much better at being open with whatever's going on for them. I think
mm,
there's a lot of stigma in the older generation, and stigma from a mental health point of view and a physical health point of view gets massively in the way.
yeah.
Stigma for me is the biggest issue around all male health, physical and mental. And you're right, I'm a massive sports fan. It's interesting, I didn't really get the sports analogy because I've been to some big games and I've got massively passionate about what's going on, not about what's going on with me, but what's literally there. And it is okay to be massively passionate there. Not before you go in, not when you come out. I get that bit, but I've never been in a position to go, oh, I can show my other emotions here because nobody's going to notice. And I think that's a
Mm,
really good point. But if you are emotional, you could show them, because everybody else thinks you're just joining in with them, and you're not. You're showing your own emotions. So I can see where that is, but sometimes it's just emotion for what's going on around them.
yeah.
Um, with we don't help people enough to create that conversation, and we're continually telling people, you should be more open. But then on the same basis, men never talk, or it's just man flu, you're making a fuss over yourself. And it's like, okay, so I can't identify mild stuff because I get accused of having man flu or something similar. So I have to wait until it's really bad before I can put my hand up, because
That's
I might
yeah.
get pushed down by not being ill enough and just making a fuss.
And let me stay on that kind of topic. So when you've had a health concern yourself, how easy have you found it to seek help or talk to others? I'll stay with you, Gary, because you just kind of segued in nicely to that.
Well, I mean, for me, it's been quite easily. I come from quite a very large, very open family. So when I was ill, it was quite easy. And then later in life, when I had bigger issues, I was surrounded by people who wouldn't let me off the hook anyway, even if I tried. So I was quite lucky. I was surrounded by people who, one, knew me well, and two, were, would make you talk because you don't get a choice. So I was quite lucky, but I know lots of other people who don't have that. And it's, for them, it's like, who do you talk to? And I find men talk loads, but it's contextual. So they talk to me loads. I went networking last night. As soon as I said what I do, everybody was chatting to me about their issues. But if I said I did something else, they wouldn't talk to me because, it's environmental. It's like, it's got a good thing. But men talk. Men do talk. We just got to make it okay. Or make them think it's okay to talk. Yeah. Which is, I guess, the football analogy.
Absolutely. How about you, Jay? Do you find it easy? I mean, you've had quite a few and ongoing health issues. Is it something that has got easier over time to talk about, or is it always come naturally to you to go, I think I need to go see a doctor, or I think I need to talk to someone about this?
It still doesn't come naturally now.
Okay.
After all of this. My predisposition is to grit my teeth and just crack on. I'm an awful ill person. I really am, because of that feeling of not wanting to let people down, whether it's my colleagues, my clients, my family. I'm just like, no, I'll just crack on. I can still do this. I can do the dinner. I can do the school runs. I can still deliver this session. And I have to consciously check myself with that, and almost coach myself and separate two different personalities and go, okay, like, have a conversation with myself, right? Or like, whether it's journaling, whether it's written down, or whether it's just a kind of reflection piece, and just kind of, if this was someone else, what conversation would I be having with them? I'm also lucky, a bit like what Gary was saying there about having people around me who hold me to account. And I think that this is actually a really key point. We talk about resilience often in the context of mental health. But obviously resilience is physical as well. Resilience is just your ability to cope with and recover from some kind of adversity. Might be mental, emotional, might be physical. So our physical resilience is our fitness, our immunity, all kinds of stuff. It's our ability to bounce back after a physical adversity. And our mental, our psychological resilience is the side of it on the mental and emotional side. And if we consider resilience in the context that is often talked about, in society and in organizations, it's very, very individualized. It's very, it's a way of passing the buck onto the individual if they can't cope with a systemic problem. Oh, you're just not resilient enough. You need to be resilient, and so on and so forth. So it becomes very individualized. And I think that's why people maybe get a bit het up about the word resilience, because it makes them think of all of this co-opting of that term. But actually resilience is also a collective trait, right? We're more resilient in groups. We're a social species. We're a collective species. We are not individualized. That is just the society we have lived in that's convincing us of that. We don't have all the skills or all the characteristics to thrive on our own. And so what we require more than anything else when it comes to resilience, I believe, is social resources around us, which can hold us to account. Like Gary was saying there, where they go, I think something's not quite right here. Come on, talk to me. Whether it's about physical health, whether it's about mental health, someone's spotting the signs, because sometimes it's easier to spot in someone else than it is yourself. You don't seem like yourself. Are you feeling all right physically, mentally? Is there something going on? Have that discussion. So someone to call you out, and also someone to people to offer support, whether it's moral support, whether it's practical support, whatever it happens to be. We all go through periods in our life when we need that due to a physical health reason, a mental health reason, anything really. We need that network around us. And that's where kind of the responsibility, yes, I'm talking about collectives, yes, I'm talking about groups and social support, but we do have the responsibility to cultivate that support and cultivate that network. And if we build that network around us where people will hold us accountable, give us support, and then we can reciprocate when they need it, that is the essence of being a person. That's the essence of being a human. But sometimes we forget that and we think, actually, I need to do all this on my own because we've been convinced of that. The kind of lone wolf, alpha male, trying not to swear, rubbish.
Well done. You used rubbish. No,
Good,
I
good
agree
for
with
me.
you. Yeah, it was very good. I totally agree with you. It's the power of network or community and support and having people that you're comfortable to be able to talk to is it's so important. So important. How about you, John? How easy have you found it in the past to ask for help or, talk to somebody when you've had a health concern?
I think as the other guys have said, I think context is really important. So, when I've caught up with really good friends, like in person, and it's like high quality time together, then very quickly we'll open up. And then also, different situation was when I had like a heart scare and an undiagnosed heart condition that purely came up from a work medical that I'd been to. And actually, I used resources there that, there's lots of resources available to us, like whether it's for your company, whether it's literally like, the NHS, whatever, there are resources there. It's taking that step to sort of, to use them. I think when it comes to physical health, I'm quite active and I love sport and things, so I'm quite impatient. So whenever I get a niggle or an injury, I'm like speed dial to the physio or whatever, because for me, that's important and I'm really aware of that. But then I know lots of people, men and women who won't do that. And it's right, I'll battle on through, I'll get better. And I'm like, why didn't you, I can't get that I can't get my head around because I'm impatient about that. That's for me a really important pillar. So I'm like, no, and I get really restless if I'm not able to sort of exercise. And for me, it's a sort of release. I think maybe maybe there's something about, as Jay said, about the importance of that social interaction. And, I went for a drink with a friend last week and, we've been planning to go out for like 18 months and it finally happened. And within like 2 minutes, we were talking about I had like a skin cancer care ages ago. I've got like a bit of skin that got cut off here. There's like a little white patch. And he told me about like a health scare he had and a big thing he had gone through and, and had surgery and all this stuff. And it's because you're in this sort of, this space of like trust and we were just like, we get on. But I think if it was just via WhatsApp or, where you're not having that high quality time together, I wouldn't go out of my way to, and I think of other groups of good friends, unless I had a reason to, I'd feel like I'm trying to get attention. Oh, it's all about me. If I was like, oh, by the way, guys, this is happening. I'd feel like a bit self-indulgent, like telling even really good friends as well, going, oh, by the way. And one of the things when you asked me to do this was, I met one of my best friends in person a few months ago. And he was like, oh, by the way, back in January, I had this like big health scare and this happened and this happened. But because, we hadn't met in person or hadn't had a proper conversation, good friendships, you don't need to stay in touch and chat all the time. And that's quite a man thing as well, where
my husband's like that. He only tells people things if he sees them in person. And I'm like, but we live in Spain. You never see anybody in person. He's like, I'll tell them one day when I see them. I pour my heart out on WhatsApp in multiple different WhatsApp chats daily. It's very different. I'm also married to the person that fell down the stairs the day before we moved out from Malta in February, and we think it's torn ligaments from the Googling that we've done. And the size of his ankle and the bruising, his entire foot was grey like an elephant. Still hasn't been to a doctor. It was February. He's done something else to it yesterday because he won't stop. And he's carried on, like, we're renovating a house. And he's like, well, it had to be done. I've had to renovate the house. And I said, it would have been better if you'd broken it. Firstly, it would have healed quicker. And secondly, you would have had to go get something done. And he was like, yeah, but then I wouldn't have been able to do all the stuff in the house. So, I mean, honestly, it's like reasoning with a brick wall sometimes. But, you know, it's like your ankle is the size of your thigh. Do you not think this is a problem? No, I'll be fine. I'll just carry on. He's an absolute shocker for that. Do you think people, just listening to what you're saying, John, and all the examples you gave there were physical health, do you think people find it easier to talk about physical health than mental health?
Probably. I think because it's more, yeah, I guess it's the classic, it's more tangible. I always used to, over years, and from different sports, if I had like a black eye, I was like, oh, great, I can get attention. It's very easy to explain.
Yeah.
It was like, like ligament damage somewhere where you can't see it. It was like, oh, well, I won't get any sympathy because you can't see it. And then it's, it's another level when it comes to mental health. I think people probably do find it easier to talk about. And again, it depends what it is. Like if it's something to do with like their balls or something, then probably people might be a bit more uncomfortable. If it's like something different, less sort of intimate, then maybe. So there's probably again levels within that. But I think mental health. I guess it depends where somebody is in that cycle of when they go, as we all have with our mental health. What
are your thoughts on that, Gary? Because I know that mental health is where you spend a lot of your time.
Yeah, I spend most of my time there. I think the biggest difference between physical and mental health, and the reason I think mental health is less spoken about and physical health potentially more, is because it's visible. If you've got a broken leg, you can't go, oh, no, I've not got a broken leg, ignore me. If you've got, if you had heart, surgery or things like that, you can see there's something, you're physically incapacitated. Loads of people will have serious levels of depression and will be completely functioning. And most people look at surface level. If you look for mental health, you can see it. They tell you clearly what's going on, but it's a different set of markers, different identifying reasons. And most people don't look that closely. So when somebody comes in and they're smiling, therefore they're happy. The fact that they're grimacing or putting a smile on, they don't look below that. So it's very easy to not notice somebody who's suffering with mental health issues, and therefore that person can avoid the conversation, which, whether it's because of stigma, whether it's because of culture, nobody likes talking about something wrong with them, whether that's a pain in their arm or pain in their head or suicidal thoughts. Nobody really likes talking about a problem. So it's easier to hide. So easier to hide mental health issues. And if we then got stigma, if we've then got a culture where we man up and all that, we just put it down to another level. So with physical issues, if you break a leg, you can't really hide it.
Yes.
And I think that's really big. With some of the intimate stuff, you might be able to hide, but eventually everything fairly much becomes visible.
Yeah. Jay, let's stay on mental health. If you had to sum up the current state of men's mental health with one or two words, what would you say and why?
I don't think you can sum it up in one or two words. I'll be honest. I think it's more complex. I think that if I had to, on the spot, because as I said, I don't read the questions beforehand because I'm just such as my attitude to stuff. Would be understandable reaction. And what I mean by that, and this ties in with something I was thinking when Gary was just talking there about, and following on from what John said about the visibility, invisibility thing. And also I was thinking about, okay, I'm sure there's another difference here. It's making me think of something else. And what kind of came to mind was using the broken leg example. That's something that's happened to you, right? Mental health is, again, looking at the individualistic nature of Western society. And there was a term that that Gary said where he said that people don't like to talk about when there's something wrong with them. Okay, and that's a key point. There's really important wording there, because when we have an experience of poor mental health, when we're experiencing depression, when we're experiencing anxiety, when we're experiencing anything like that, we are told that's because there's something wrong with us. We're told that there's something wrong with us. If we have a broken leg, using that example again, that's something which has happened to us, right? The broken leg is a physical reaction to a external stimulus, right? Quite often that is the case with other illnesses as well. There's still some, if we look at chronic illnesses where people think that there is some kind of personal action which has led to it. So if someone, for example, has type 2 diabetes and they are overweight or have obesity, for example, then there is stigma, there is judgment. There is judgment from other people saying, well, this is your fault. Okay. Whether we like that thought or not, some people still have that, despite the fact there is a plethora of factors at play when it comes to that, right? One of the biggest ones being stress. When we look at cancer, we don't have quite the same thing, unless they're a smoker and they got lung cancer, in which case you have people arguing that they shouldn't have access to public healthcare because they did it themselves. And so I think that the problem, and I'm not saying any of that's right, by the way, because it's not, but the point that I'm making is that with mental health, it is almost entirely considered an individual problem. There is something wrong with you. Your brain is broken. This goes back to the old chemical imbalance theory of depression, which has been completely debunked. The idea that your brain isn't working properly. We need to fix you. So the reason I say understandable reaction, and I say this for mental health summed up in 2 words, or poor mental health, mental illness, mental health conditions, understandable reaction, because of the environment that people are finding themselves in for various reasons. And you often hear a term, mental health doesn't discriminate. And up to a point that is correct, because no one is immune, but there are greater risk factors. If you look at poverty, it increases your chances of experiencing poor mental health. If you look at coming from a marginalized ethnic group, you are more likely to experience poor mental health. If you are transgender, you are more likely to experience poor mental health because of the extended scope of chronic stress you are likely to experience through discrimination and so on and so forth. Or if it's poverty through not having enough money for basic stuff, right? Not being able to make ends meet is a stressor. Stress is not a mental health condition, but it can lead to them. And physical health. Even when you look at physical health outcomes are worse for people in lower socioeconomic groups. The difference between life expectancy in different socioeconomic groupings is astonishingly different. You're looking at a gap of 10 plus years in life expectancy because of your income. So when I say understandable reaction, I think that when we're looking at mental health and we're looking at poor mental health, I think that is an understandable reaction to the environment and the society that we're living in.
Wow. That's absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I was looking up some stats for this, I put some into the LinkedIn post that I did this morning, but it was also very clear that in deprived communities, the numbers were even higher.
And there's less access to healthcare as well.
Yeah, way less. So it becomes almost like a vicious circle, isn't it? It's like you can't get out of it. You can't get the treatment you need, so it gets worse. And it's just, it's a really sad state of affairs, actually. Gary, what are your thoughts around just summing up the state of men's mental health?
Well, it's an interesting thing because I work, obviously, that's why you invited me onto the podcast. I do quite a lot of work around men's mental health, and there's a lot of talk about men's mental health now. There's a lot of talk, very, very little action. So, there's a lot of men's mental health talking about men don't talk and things like that. And actually, they're suppressing the talk because they're actually saying men don't talk. So we don't. It's a bit of a negative for me. But it is hopeful because we are having this conversation now. 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, even if we had the technology, we wouldn't have been talking about men's mental health. We probably wouldn't have been talking about mental health. So there is a level of hope. And yes, there can be definitely individualism in there, which we need to go. Everybody needs to be treated as they need to be treated. But society, depending on where you brought up, who you brought up by. Before we had this, I had a client and they were coming from a very strict Muslim background. They're coming to see me in secret because it doesn't fit with their culture. I train people, and the average person who become a therapist is a middle-aged white woman. We have very few blokes who train in mental health and we need to change that. We need to remove all the barriers to accessing.
That's really
help.
Interesting, and I've had a similar conversation around the demographics in HR, because that's all middle class white women who are degree educated. Not all, but vast majority. Yeah. And I guess the question, I don't expect you to have answers to this, but do you think that kind of career doesn't appeal, or are we not talking about it enough? Are we not talking in the right places? What is it that you think contributes to that?
I think it's twofold. One fold is I don't think there's enough people talking about that as a potential future for those career base. But I also think a lot of the people who aren't coming into that space, certainly in mental health, is their culture doesn't fit. It's just like we had loads of people from, say, certain culture groups or certain nationalities not doing this and not doing that. So we'll find there's a lot of pressure for people not to do things because that doesn't go with the 200 years of our culture previously. So, it's, I get people who are very religious look at me like I'm the devil because I talk about what happens in the brain and I talk about neuroscience, and only God should know what goes on in your brain, and you're working with the devil. So there's a lot of cultural, society-based prejudice against people coming into that workforce. HR is predominantly female industry. So just like nursing, just like, you can be a male doctor, but being a male nurse, what's that say about you, mate? And all that. And same as the therapy side of things. So, I had people laugh in my face who knew me of old, owning bars and nightclubs and things like that. And I'm a therapist. And they would just laugh at me. You can't be serious. Because a bloke can't do therapy. Well, there's three blokes on here.
There's a lot of male psychiatrists. I wonder if that's like the doctor-nurses thing, isn't it?
To be a
psychiatrist is medically trained first.
Yes.
I think there's also a self-fulfilling prophecy in it, using the HR thing as an example, and a bit like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like Gary said about telling men they're rubbish at talking, is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Because you hear something enough, you start to believe it, right?
Men don't talk. I've had experience of it.
Yeah, and if you keep saying like HR is mostly women, that's going to put men off doing it. Not because they don't want to be in an industry which is primarily women, but they think there's no place for them. And it's the same. So it's unconscious. It's not a conscious thing. But if you're told that's mostly women, then you go, okay, that's for women. Your brain oversimplifies it just automatically to make sense of stuff. Right?
Yeah, I wonder if there's a space somewhere in the STEM world, scientific and engineering world, they do a big drive to get more young women involved in STEM, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Nowhere do we see a drive to get more men into historically female-led industries like HR, nursing, mental health. Sorry, John, I probably jumped in on you there.
No, I was just nodding. I was just, just got me thinking. It's, and I think sort of really interesting points about the like bigger picture, like systemic side of things as well. It's so mental health is so complicated, and everybody's, man or woman, it's a different individual situation. But then, it's really interesting, to think of, what are those factors? What are the factors that you can, what can you do to increase the chance of being healthy mentally? I think that's, I often go to the like solution side of things, and probably because I'm a coach and I've always wanted to help people. So I think that's the interesting next bit. It's like, well, what can people do? What can society do? As Gary said, it's an interesting one to say, well, actually, what can you do to increase the number of therapists from different backgrounds, as an example? Because then people will be more comfortable to go, the classic, you're more comfortable to see somebody like you. So however you make the diversity cut and decide on whatever the characteristic is like, there must be benefit in, for gender we're talking about today, but getting more men to be therapists, surely that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more diversity in many professions that don't have it currently. It would be, because there's such rewarding work out there that I don't think needs to be gender specific, or it's
but
just
then,
societal expectation, I guess.
On that same basis, that has a potential for creating more mental health issues. Because if you put a man in a female environment, female-led, they're questioning themselves and they're stressing over so many things which are not set for them. So then there's more potential for mental health crisis. So
like how I felt in oil trading all those years.
It's 100%. It's the flip of that.
Absolutely.
It's nothing new. It's nothing new.
No one wants to feel different or other.
Yeah. So,
but I think that comes back to the context thing again, and it comes back to that focus on telling people, in the same way as people are told to talk more. Talk about how your feelings more, talk about your emotions more, your mental health more, etc., etc. And that's all well and good if you give people the environment in which they can actually do that. Because obviously if you talk about something and then you're dismissed or you're invalidated, you're actually going backwards. You're not even staying in the same place. You are going backwards because you ain't opening up again. So it's about the environment. And as Gary was saying there, the environment, if you're going into one that isn't set up for who you are, then you're starting from a background level of chronic stress that's higher. And this goes back to that point about, if you are discriminated against, you will have higher chances of experiencing poor mental health. So if society as a whole is not set up for you, then you're experiencing that every minute of every damn day of your life, right? If it's to do with your work and you're like, well, I'm not going to go into that because it's set up for, I'm a woman, it's set up for men. Or I'm a man, it's set up for women. And so the support systems are not there. The environment is not right. And the capacity will already be slightly full before I even start the work. If I'm transgender or I'm non-binary or something, then it could be the same in either of those circumstances. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And again, that is why you see a higher prevalence of poor mental health in those communities, because of that, because it's not set up for them. It's a bit like if you are physically disabled and you go to a place which is not set up for you. You have a physical disability. If you're a wheelchair user, for example, and you go somewhere that's got steps, then it's not accessible to you. If you go somewhere which has a wheelchair ramp, you're no longer disabled in that way. You still have that access. It's your environment which enables or disables you in that way. And it's the same with whether you're able to do that job or not. I think that if you change the it would take a few early adopters, you know, and it always will. The more people that go into it, the more diversity that you have, the more the system is forced to change.
But hasn't this already been done? So, you know, Kirsty said she experienced this 20 years ago in gas and oil. You know, we experienced this when, you know, we were the Disability Act formed. We've been through this scenario so many times, and we've learned. We don't appear to have learned any lessons.
Do you not think it's any better?
Not for. I'm sitting here as a man who's a therapist and that. So, but it's not reported better. That's the difference. There's no. If you look at men's physical health, like testicular cancer, like bladder cancer, like many male health issues, it doesn't get the same level of PR. Suicide, biggest killer of men under 45. 3 in 1 men. Last 2023 had more suicides than they've had any year since 1990. It's horrific. More 3 times more people are killed or die through suicide than are killed on the UK roads. What press do you get when somebody takes their life? Loads of press if there's a big pile up on the A1. Nothing. We don't get the same level of media coverage, and we don't stimulate the right level of conversation.
I think when I was
so much is media led.
When I was saying don't you think it's got any better, I was referring more to the industry gender balances that we were discussing. But I absolutely agree that I think things are getting worse in terms of mental health. But I think that's society wide. And I think that the context of the statistic around men's suicide rates is really important to have a counterpoint there, because we hear that statistic quite a lot in terms of that 75% of suicides in the UK are men. But and that's quite a big difference, right? 3 times as many men as women are dying by suicide. However, more women than men are attempting suicide.
Yes, and an attempt is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people do go, "Oh, it's just a cry for help," and that it's not. It's just an attempt to take your own life. I think the difference is men are more. I can't remember the right term, but we're what we do is more drastic in the moment. So the chance of surviving the attempt is limited because it's it's full on, you might say. Yeah.
And I think that's important. It's an important context piece, because often that people use statistics obviously to support whatever point they're trying to make, and I get that. That's what statistics are for, right? You can find statistics to support anything. If you're, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, because I'm here having a conversation about men's health. And obviously mental health is part of that. And I think that we do need to talk about it. And so using these statistics to paint the picture of, look, this is really important. There's a lot of people dying here, and this is really important. And a lot of people whose quality of life is being impaired to a point where it's a horrendous quality of life, even if they don't then attempt suicide. However, I think that we need to understand we don't want to drive a wedge too far into this and say that because more men are dying by suicide, that actually men are experiencing suicidal thoughts more than women, because they're not. And women are actually more likely to attempt suicide. Now, of course, the other thing with the statistics is the reports of it. A lot of things, if people are reporting experiences of anxiety, that's self-reported. Are women more likely to report that than men? There's so many factors at play with statistics.
You're right, and it's just stats, you can spin it any way, but it's stats like, even if you do go to the doctors and you get referred for therapy, around 32-34% of men actually go for the therapy. So it starts earlier, because 30%, 32% of referrals are men, the rest are for women. So men don't put their hand up so easily in those critical places, and they self-medicate. The chances of becoming An addict, for the coping mechanism, is much higher 3 times higher in men than it is in women, because we self-medicate rather than finding an answer. And I think in physical health, we'll walk it off. We'll just run it off. It'll be fine until we can't run it off anymore. And now it's too late. We're going to need serious physical support.
On the physical health, I'm sorry to interrupt there, Kirsty. I just had a thought pop into my head that I was going to mention earlier when John was talking about physical health issues, and you mentioned about someone's more likely to talk about something that's visible or less intimate, and if it's about your balls, you're less likely to talk about it and stuff like that. And it made me think about a conversation I actually had recently, which I found really refreshing, which was when a friend of mine casually on the school run, this wasn't a place of kind of quality connection, as you put it. This was just a passing thing. What are you up to today? I'll get my prostate checked. And I was like, fair play to you. And it wasn't because of a scare. It was just a routine thing. He was like, yeah, not massively looking forward to it, to be honest, but got to be done. And that was just a passing, what are you up to today thing. And I was like, this is what we need more of. This normalization.
No,
of
you're
the stuff
so right.
People are too,
It's like this almost Victorian prudishness that we still have about our own bodies. And I don't think, again, I don't think I ever even said the word smear test out loud to a friend until the last 5 years. And yet it's something we all have to do every few years, and nobody likes it. It's no fun. But nowadays, I've got friends now that will go, I've got a smear test. Like, have you been recently? You really should. And just little things like that. And I know women are better at talking about this stuff anyway, but it's like, it's just part of your body. It's just part of your body. But there's this like, can't mention bottoms or anything like that. It's so ridiculous, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Or you say it, you don't actually say anything. Listen, I've got older in-laws who never mention anything. It's just like really prudish. Well,
my grandmother used to call the toilet the place. She'd say, "I'm just going to the place."
So kids are much better at it. But unfortunately, the kids aren't the ones with the problems. People in those middle years have probably got the bigger issues, and we need to get more like down with the kids.
Now, I'm conscious of time. I also know that one of you has got to rush off for the school run at exactly 3:00. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going off-piste here. See what I did there, John? Going to go off-piste with the questions and ask you, this is a loaded question. Do you think that we are going to see much of an improvement in this, or is it just too big of an issue for us to fix? And let me ask you that first, Jay.
So despite the fact that I might have sounded a bit doom and gloom with the scale of the issue and the scale of the systemic problem, I absolutely do think that we can see improvement in it. And I think that I'm an optimist in the sense of, in most things, I consider myself a pessimistic optimist. I'm a pessimist in the sense that things are awful and things will go wrong and life sucks sometimes. But an optimist in the sense of, but we can find a way through that together, right? So the optimism in me is not a blind optimism of, everything's great, everything's fine, head in the sand kind of optimism. It's a very practical, pragmatic optimism, I like to think anyway. And I think that what that comes back to, more than anything, what I talked about earlier about community and about social support, I think is the biggest factor. We talk about male loneliness epidemic. That's in the news at the moment. We talk about men not feeling like they are able to talk, again, because of the context they find themselves in, because they're lonely, because they don't have those connections. If we build these pockets of community, there is no systemic fix from the top down. We cannot wait for governments and companies and stuff to save us. It ain't going to happen, because that is not how it works. There's too many financial interests involved. That is not how society is set up. What we need to do is take responsibility at a grassroots level to create communities where men and groups of all genders can come together, can collaborate on local projects, can use their skills, can learn new skills and skill share, resource share, look after each other when things aren't going well, in the way that communities have always evolved to do for millennia until the recent few centuries that we've had, where local communities have been systematically gutted. We need to take that power back to a grassroots level. And this is where, you know, at the start, prevention is better than cure, right? That level of community will help prevent poor mental health. And then if it does arise, you've got the social structures there to support each other without relying on someone to come in and save you. So I'm an optimist, and I do think that this is already happening, because so many people are disillusioned with the way society is going. They go, you know what, I'm opting out of this and I'm just creating my own little network.
I'm going to do it myself. Yeah.
And this is done not about mental health, it's about everything. Mental health is just is part of it, and poor mental health is a symptom of a wider thing. So it is about building those communities. For me, that is the absolute crux of it, and everything else stems from that. So I'm very hopeful and very optimistic, and I think it's already happening.
John, what are your thoughts around changes that you're seeing and how you think we might be able to continue to see things improve?
Yeah, I think I'm a cynical optimist, I'd say, like Jay with many things, but I think, and because, you know, this was coming up, it's just been, if I look back in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I've had like 3 or 4 really good conversations with different people, different men, and it has covered mental health, it has covered physical health. So I think there is more openness has been more openness in the right context, in the right environment. You know, I think, again, there's that challenge, you know, you've got to, you know, nobody's going to come and save you or something. You know, I think there's always that reminder, and I know people talk about it a lot, but there's loads of resources available. You know, if you're working for a company, you've got private healthcare, there's so much support. Whether it's mental or physical health, and you know, I've got a really good, you know, one of the things that got me thinking is I've got a really good friend who I think their dad died from bowel cancer, and he's never done his work. He's been at the same company for like 20 something years, and he's never done his work checkup, but he's one of the cleverest people I know. But you know, so there's a gap. But you know, when you know, so I guess as a friend, part of me is to say, well, how can I encourage, you know, just on a micro level, how can I encourage him to say, hey, look, I had my random work checkup years ago, just went along to tick a box, and it found this thing I had no idea about, and now I'm better. So I think being aware of resources is really important. I think Jay's point about communities and people is like, that's like the magic. And then, you know, I guess it goes back to being aware of the importance of sort of friendships and talking to people, you know, not just to talk about mental health, but it's health, you know, it is health. Not just go to work, head down, work, and then go back to your family, your microcosm of your, you know, that small part of your life. So yeah, no, I am positive, and certainly the conversations I've had and being able to do this and thinking, right, after this already, I'd like to share this with people I'd like to share this with, just get them thinking.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. And Gary, just to finish up with you, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'm quite optimistic, because the fact that we're on here talking about it means there's change happening. The fact that I run my own podcast around mental health. I think physical health lags a little bit because we're a little bit shyer about going for routine tests. You know, not many men feel their balls, where women are always checking for lumps when they need to. You know, we need to move that, but the conversation has started, and eventually the physical actions will follow. We can't rely on government. I think Andy's Man Club, which is a mental health / loneliness place, they have 5,500 people a week go through their doors now. So we've started that community movement, and we're a tribal-based set of individuals. As a species, we're tribal. the Industrial Revolution separated that. We're coming back to being more tribal. We're starting to get that. Social media doesn't help, but it's a way to communicate, so it's good and bad. But actually, the conversations are out there. So the more people talk, the more people, like John says, yeah, I found this on my test. Oh, maybe I should go then. The more people are open about it, the more people will then open up about it. It's follow the leader. We just need more leaders to open up about there. So it starts from the top, actually. If we can get more CEOs talking about their mental health challenges, we get more people on the floor level like me talking about mine.
It's a great place to finish. Thank you so much. That was really interesting, and I will get the recording out there onto the app for everyone tomorrow. And thank you very much. I'll let you go off and collect the kids. And thank you very much for being involved in this. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.